Okay, this is the third little video, and this is a more reflective video. And I want to start out by telling you a personal story. When I was in graduate school, something very bad happened to me. And I was working on my dissertation at the time, and it was literally overwhelming, and I wanted to quit. I didn't see any way that I was going to deal with this bombshell that had gone off in my life and at the same time complete my dissertation. So I went to see my advisor, and she knew about the situation, and we talked for some time about it, and she said, well, one thing you could do is you could take this rest of the semester off, take an incomplete on your dissertation, and come back next semester and complete it. And in the meantime, take care of your life. It sounded pretty good, and it was well meant. But when I went home and I thought about it, I thought, wait a minute. This work that I'm doing, this dissertation, this task I had set for myself, that was the only hold I had on sanity. And if I had let that go, I don't know what would have happened. I had to hang on to that piece, that work that I was doing that I promised myself and I committed to do. So I didn't take the incomplete. I finished the semester and finished the dissertation, and turns out it was exactly the right thing to do. But here's my point. Most of the time, the life anchors the work. It's an anchor. So, you go to school, you learn, you get a better job, and you use the money that you earn from your work to do things with your life. So most of the time, the reason you're doing the work is because your life is important to you, and doing the work makes your life better. So most of the time, under normal situations, the life anchors the work. But there are times when you can be under great stress, when the work anchors the life. And I can tell you that was one of those instances in my life where the work I was doing is probably what saved my sanity. What got me, through that period was the work I was doing. And abandoning the work would have been to abandon the only hold I had on sanity. This is not unusual or unique to me. This happens to everybody. But there are times when the work anchors the life. And when what you got to do is do it because you said you were going to do it, and the life takes care of itself. Now that, I think if you're one of those people who works all the time, then you've got another problem that you need to talk to somebody else about. But you see what I'm saying? Sometimes the work you're doing is what makes the life valuable. Not always, and not most of the time, but sometimes. So, that's my story. And I want to talk a little bit about stress management and the sort of levels of stress that kind of normally grow when you're in school and when you're trying to do the impossible. And what we might do about that. For one thing, in the next week, while we have this down week, I'm going to be re-evaluating the focus of the class. We've been doing a lot of literature, but if you notice, the title of the class is Argumentation Through Literature. And we haven't really been doing enough of the argumentation that this class is designed to teach. And so I think we're going to need to shift the focus and maybe revamp the schedule a little bit, and maybe take some things away and maybe add some other things. It's all about my thinking what is best for you, not what's best or easiest for me, but what's best for you. So I'm going to propose some changes, not this week, but next week, and because I think we haven't touched enough on that point, and we need to start touching on that and that more formal stuff. So basically, switching gears now, it's a 4-unit class. And that means that one should be spending 12 to 15 hours a week on just this class. And I almost guarantee if you're spending 12 hours a week on this class, you're doing just fine. On the other hand, if you're spending an hour or two or three, that's not enough. You can't get the job done. That's a fact. And, maybe you need to take an evaluation and decide what can give somewhere, or decide you're going to be satisfied with your performance. That's fine if you're satisfied. It's not for me to judge. But if you're not satisfied, it's possible that you're not investing enough time. And so the simple answer is to find some way to invest more time. And again, how you can do that, I don't know. But I can certainly, if you want to talk about it, I can advise and tell you. I can't tell you what to do. I can tell you what I would do if I were in your situation. That's all I can do. But one of the ways I think about education, especially higher education, and especially higher education in this context where you've all got jobs and lives and families and other stuff going on. If you've ever been in the military, especially in the Marines, a Marine will tell you that basic training is like the toughest thing they're ever going to go through. My niece was in the Marines, and she said it's the hardest thing she's ever done. And she tends to think that they made it harder on her because she's a woman, and they didn't really want women in the Marines, and so they make it even harder on the women. I don't know if that's true, but that was her feeling. But basic training or boot camp or whatever you call it is, for a soldier, the hardest thing you're going to have to do. And why is that? Because you're going to go out and you're going to be in life or death situations. So one way to think about why education is and should be hard is it's a kind of basic training. Ladies and gentlemen, there are people out there in positions of great power and prominence, and I'm not talking about politics now. I'm not talking about political parties or any of that. There are people out there in positions of great power and prominence who will take your heart and your mind and your soul, and they will crush them. And they will not think twice about doing it. In fact, they may not even know they've done it. So it's a battle out there. There's no doubt about it. And if my metaphor of basic training makes sense, what's happening in classes like this, critical thinking classes like this, is you're gaining the weapons to have a chance to fight back when you get out there in the real world. And I don't want to send my students out unarmed, without the weapons of critical thinking that you'll need to fight against these people who will crush your heart and your mind and won't think twice about it. That's a fact. And anybody who's paying attention, I think, knows that. So, if it's hard, it's supposed to be hard. And if you're getting these valuable tools, that's what you're supposed to get. On the other hand, if you're complaining about how hard it is and that's all you're doing, you're not going to get the tools. Okay, so I don't know if that makes sense to you. That's how I think about it I thought about it when school got hard. And then I would look at the people out there in the culture who don't have the skills I had because they never got them in school. They're drowning. They're not going to survive in the world. And my skills, my critical thinking skills, give me a chance. Will you win? I don't know. But you have a chance. So that's one way I think about the stress level, is it's necessary to gaining the weapons that I need. Another fact of stress is you can deal with very high levels of stress for a short, defined period of time. That's psychological and anatomical fact. I can deal with very high levels of stress as long as I see an end to it. So I can say, okay, I may be stressed in this class right now, but I see the end in 8 weeks, and that will be the end of this stress. You can deal with that. It's the ongoing existential, without ending stress that kills people. People don't die or get sick from short-term high levels of stress. What people get sick and die from are the high levels of stress that go on for their entire lives. In other words, people who build that stress into their lives, and it goes on for 40, 50 years. That's what kills people, not the short-term high stress. So the question I want to discuss in this forum is, two things. They're kind of unrelated. But the first is, how are you responding to the stress levels? I'm feeling it too, and I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I'll tell you, I've diagnosed what happened, and I've decided what I'm going to do next semester. And this is what happened when I was assigned these two sections of this class. And I asked my supervisor to put both sections together so that I'd have one great big class, which meant practically I only have to make one set of discussion forums. If I have two classes, I have to make them in one class and then copy and paste them to the other class, because they won't transfer across. So I said, yeah, let's put them all together in one class, and we'll see how it goes. And so normally a section of this class will cap, meaning we don't let any more students in at 35. So I started out with two sections of 35 combined, and then I let a few more people in. So I started out with a great big class of 80 people. And it doesn't increase the workload. It's just the way the workload is managed is I'm finding more difficult than it was worth. For instance, I get up sometimes on a Saturday morning and I've got 400 forum posts. There's no way that I can possibly even read all of those. And it's not that the workload would be less if I had two sections, but if I had two sections, I'd get 200 here and 200 there, and I wouldn't see it all at once. So it would help me psychologically and emotionally deal with the workload. I get up and I've got 400 forum posts, or I've got 75 papers to grade. It's overwhelming psychologically. And if I had the classes separate, I'd have 20 papers here and 22 over there or something like that, or 35 here and 27 over here. The workload would seem much more manageable. It's the same workload. It's just not having to look at it all at once, I think, would be helpful. So what I'm going to do to reduce the stress, I can't reduce the workload, but what I'm going to do to reduce my stress next term is, if I get two sections of this class, I'm going to leave them as separate sections so that the psychological, emotional feeling of being completely overwhelmed will be less. So one thing I'd like you to do is to talk about how you manage the workload. You can't make the workload less. If you want to do your very best, you have to deal with this certain level of work. You have to do it. And that can't change. But what might be able to change is you might be able to do something about how you perceive this. One of the reasons I organized the class in weekly modules is you really only have to look at the module for the week. You really don't have to go anywhere else. And I thought that would help you manage the workload, or help you psychologically and emotionally perceive the limits of the workload for the week. I thought it would help. I don't know if it helps or not, but that was my thinking behind doing that. So the first question is, what are you going to do, or what do you think you can do to compartmentalize the work if you need to, or manage it in some other way? A lot of people keep calendars, and there's the calendar on Canvas that helps you manage. But if you're feeling really stressed, number one, know that that's normal and that's going to go away in 8 weeks. So don't invest it with more power than it has, because it's a relatively small thing. Even though it seems huge at the time, it's a relatively small thing. So talk about ways you might manage the workload Because if you're feeling high levels of stress, there's something that's not being managed as well as you could manage it. And it might be this class, it might be something else in your life, I don't know. But midterm is a good time to take a look at that stuff and see what changes you're intending to make that might make it easier. And of course, there are professionals on campus to help with that, and I survived the system. I got some pretty good ideas too. I'm willing to share. But you're not destined to deal with this level of stress. If it's really, really uncomfortable, then manage it in some way, and you can. The second thing, and I guess it's unrelated, but I'm going to put it onto this video too. What are we at? We're at 15 minutes already. So I'm going to stop this one and get it up there and make one more little discussion. Okay? Hang on. Bye.